Affliction Warlocks are all about adding curses, diseases, and damage over time, or dots, to our enemies, killing them with a death of 1,000 cuts, as they might say. Let's look at everything you're going to need to know to succeed in Cataclysm Classic with this spec. Starting off with what race to play, if you are Alliance, I would advise to go for Worgen for mainly 2 reasons. The first is the Dark Flight racial, giving you a fantastic movement speed increase cooldown whenever you need it. Second, we have Viciousness, increasing our critical strike chance by 1%, and this is one of the best racials in the game now in Cataclysm Classic. If you are on the Horde side, I would say to go for Orc, as they have a fantastic spell power cooldown as one of their racials. Looking at the stat priority, Intellect is going to reign king over all of the others, of course. This is going to give us more spell power, a higher mana pool, and also some crit chance all built into it. After that, we want to make sure that those juicy spells we're getting with our Intellect are actually hitting our target, meaning we do want to hit the hit cap of 17%. After that, it's going to be Haste, and this is kind of self-explanatory when we understand how Haste works and also how the Affliction spec works. Basically, Haste is going to increase the number of ticks or amount of times that our spells do damage on our dots. There's a lot of acronyms there. DOTS stands for damage over time. Imagine you're doing 1,000 damage over 10 seconds. Technically then, there's going to be 100 damage every second. But if we get a lot more haste, we can actually get some extra 100 damages in there in the same time frame, meaning it would do damage every 0.8 seconds or 0.9 seconds, for example, still within the 10-second window. Then we're going to be doing Critical Strike, and lastly, Mastery is going to be our least preferential secondary stat. Quite simply, Mastery increases our shadow damage as an Affliction Warlock. Now we're going to have a look at all of the different talents that we're choosing and why we're choosing them, paired then with the Glyphs. If you don't understand how any of these synergize together when we're going through them, don't worry, because I'm going to put it all together into the rotation afterwards. But it is important that we look at the foundations of the spec and the talents we are choosing before we do that to fully understand what is going on and why we're picking them. Now, I did mention earlier that Affliction has a lot of dots or damage over times. Corruption is one of those dots. Improved Corruption increases the damage of that spell by 12%. Improved Life Tap is going to increase the amount of mana gained by our Life Tap by 20%, which is this spell here. You life tap for 15% of your total health, converting 140% of that straight into mana. And then we have one of my favourite talent names, Doom and Gloom, increasing the critical strike chance of our Bane spells. We can only have one of these on each target, so if we are going with only one target, we can only have one of these up, and that would be the Bane of Agony and the Bane of Doom. Jinx is going to make our Curse of the Elements also affect up to 15 nearby enemy targets within 40 yards of the cursed targets. We do have a lot of curses that we can use as well as a Warlock. Your Curse of Weakness increases the target's energy, rage, focus, or runic power costs of abilities by 10% while active. Then we've got Soul Siphon, increasing the amount drained by your Drain Life and Drain Soul by an additional 6% for each of your affliction effects on the target, up to a maximum of 18%. And that is quite literally where we are just draining their life or soul. And that is actually going to generate something we have here called Soul Shards. And that is an important part of playing a Warlock that we're going to discuss in the rotation. We also have Siphon Life. When you deal damage of your Corruption spell, you have a 50% chance to be healed for a percentage of the damage done. And Eradication. When you deal damage again with Corruption, you have a 6% chance to increase your spell casting speed by 20% for 10 seconds, and have a passive effect that we are going to thoroughly enjoy taking advantage of. We've got a really interesting talent here, Soul Swap. You instantly deal X amount of damage. For 20 seconds after that, the next target you cast Soul Swap Exhale on, which is the spell you get after it, will be afflicted by the shadow damage over time effects and suffer X amount of damage. This is a really good way of duplicating damage onto another enemy that you're fighting. And that is generally going to be Unstable Affliction and our Corruption spell, using that Soul Swap to duplicate those dots onto our other target. We've also got Shadow Embrace. Your Shadow Bolt and Haunt spells apply the Shadow Embrace effect, increasing shadow periodic damage dealt to the target by you for 5%, and that can stack up to 3 times as well, meaning a total of 15% extra damage. We've also got Death's Embrace. While at or below 25% health, your Drain Life heals an additional amount of your health and increases the damage done by your shadow spells by 12% when your target is at or below 25% health. It does mean that our rotation is going to change a little bit when the target does reach a lower level of health, that being 25% and below. Nightfall gives our Corruption and Drain Life spells a 4% chance for you to enter a Shadow Trance. And that is basically going to make your next Shadow Bolt completely instant cast. Then we have Soulburn, Seed of Corruption, grants the Soulburn empowerment to your Seed of Corruption spell. Your Seed of Corruption detonation effect will afflict corruption on all enemy targets. The Soul Shard will be refunded if the detonation is successful. And that is this spell here, Seed of Corruption, embeds a demon seed in the enemy target, causing shadow damage over 17 seconds. When the target takes 2,000 total damage, or when they die, the seed will inflict X amount of shadow damage to all enemies within 15 yards. Only one corruption spell per warlock can be active on any one target. And then we also have this spell here, Soulburn. Now, to use Soulburn, we are actually going to need a Soul Shard, and we get that from Drained Soul. If the target is at or below 25% health, Drained Soul causes double the normal damage, and if the target dies while being drained and yields experience or honor, the caster will gain 3 soul shards and 10% of his total mana. Soul shards are required for Soulburn, meaning then if you go into a fight with your 3 soul shards, you are actually going to be then limited to only using Soulburn 3 times in a fight. And you can see here it consumes a soul shard, allowing you to use the secondary spec effects on some of your spells. So when you use Soulburn, consuming a soul shard, you can then use this secondary effect you can see here on your Seed of Corruption. Your Seed of Corruption detonation effect will afflict corruption on all enemy targets. We're only going to be using this when there's a lot of targets, and it's a good way of spreading corruption onto all of them. Corruption is this dot here, corrupting the target, causing X amount of shadow damage over 19 seconds. We've then got Everlasting Affliction, increasing the critical effect chance of your Corruption, Seed of Corruption, and Unstable Affliction, just increasing your crit chance there. And your Drain Life, Drain Soul, and Haunt spells have a 100% chance to reset the duration of corruption on the target. Putting it simply, we're going to be putting corruption on our target when we go into combat, and then using Haunt to refresh the duration of it, meaning we generally only need to actually apply it once, and then it's up forever, as long as we refresh it with Haunt. We then have Pandemic, reduces the global cooldown of your Bane and Curse spells by 0.5 seconds, and your Drained Soul has a 100% chance to refresh the duration of your Unstable Affliction spell when dealing damage on targets, again below 25% health, or what we're going to call the Execute phase. Lastly, we gain the Haunt spell that I just mentioned regarding our Corruption. You send a ghostly soul into the target, dealing shadow damage and increasing all damage done by your shadow damage over time effects to the target by 23% for 12 seconds. When the Haunt spell ends or is dispelled, the soul returns to you, healing you for all of the damage it done. Then, we're going to put a few other talents into the other trees. We've put 3 out of 3 into the Dark Arts, reducing the cast time of your Imp's Firebolt spell, increasing the damage done by your Felguard's Legion Strike, and increasing the damage done by your Fell Hunter's Shadow Bite, basically enhancing your pet's damage. Speaking of demons then, which one should we be going for the optimum DPS? I always recommend in single target AoE and AoE that you just take the Fell Hunter, which you can see I am summoning here. They have a few very good abilities. One down here is Spell Lock, which is basically an interrupt and silence on your target. They also have Devour Magic on a 15-second cooldown, purging a beneficial magic effect from the enemy. Shadow Bite, biting the enemy causing shadow damage, plus an additional 30% damage for each of your damage over time effects on the target. And lastly, Fell Intelligence. And you can see that's giving me a buff up here, increasing maximum mana, and we're going to regenerate mana every 5 seconds. And that is actually raid-wide. So everyone will be benefiting from that buff. Lastly, our last 6 points are going into Destruction. 3 out of 3 into Shadow and Flame, increasing the damage done by your Shadow Bolt spell by 12%, and your Shadow Bolt has a 100% chance to cause the Shadow and Flame effect. What does that effect do? It causes the target to be vulnerable to spell damage, increasing spell critical strike chance against that target by 5% for 30 seconds. Lastly, Bane, reducing the cast time of your Shadow Bolt spell by 0.5 seconds. Now that we've gone through all of the talents, what glyphs are we going to be using in our rotation? I recommend the Haunt glyph in your first prime glyph, where the bonus damage granted by a Haunt spell is increased by an additional 3%. Glyph of Corruption, another one of our favourites. Your Corruption spell has a 4% chance to cause you to enter a Shadow Trance after damaging the opponent, again reducing the cast time of your Shadow Bolt. So let's give you a few different ways we can enter that. TLDR, if you see your Shadow Bolt light up as a proc, it's going to be an instant cast, use it. And lastly, Glyph of Unstable Affliction, decreasing the casting time of Unstable Affliction by 0.2 seconds. For our major glyphs, we're going for Shadow Bolt, reducing the mana cost of it, Life Tap, reducing the global cooldown on it, and Glyph of Soul Swap for AoE situations. Multiple target. It's specifically for 2 targets, should I say, sorry, not AoE. Your Soul Swap leaves your damage over time spells behind on the target you Soul Swapped from, but gives Soul Swap a 30-second cooldown, and that's how we're making it viable in that situation. Then, for minor glyphs, we're going for Curse of Exhaustion, increasing the range of it, Health Funnel, reducing the pushback suffered from damaging attacks while funneling it, and also Drained Soul, where it restores 10% of your total mana if you kill a target with it. So now that we've looked through all of that, how does it all come together into the actual rotation that we're going to be playing, both in AoE, single target, and in the execute phase? We're going to start off with what we're doing in the main phase of the fight, or better known as the 100% to 25% phase. So the non-execute phase, I suppose. The first thing we're going to do is put on our Curse of the Elements. Curses the target for 5 minutes, reducing Arcane Fire, Frost Nature and Shadow resistances by 184, and increases magic damage taken by the target by 8%. Only one curse per Warlock can be active on one target. It's really important to note that some other classes can also provide this, which are Assassination Rogues, Balanced Druids, Unholy Death Knights, or maybe even another Warlock. So make sure that you're communicating with your raid group so you don't end up overlapping these. Not that it will, but you don't want to be wasting anyone's global cooldowns, of course. The next thing we're going to do is apply and maintain our Corruption on the target, our first dot or damage over time. Remember, we're going to be automatically refreshing this with our Haunt spell. As you can see here, it's completely refreshed the duration on the target. Then, we're going to apply and maintain our Unstable Affliction on the target. Shadowy energy slowly destroys the target, dealing damage over 15 seconds. In addition, if the Unstable Affliction is dispelled, it will cause damage to the Dispeller and silence them. Only one Unstable Affliction may be active at one time. Then we're going to use our Bane of Doom. Remember, we've also got Bane of Agony, and we can only use one of these on one target at once. Bane's the target with impending doom. Oh dear, not good, is it? Dealing damage every 15 seconds. When Bane of Doom deals damage, it has a 20% chance to summon a Demon Guardian. Only one target can have Bane of Doom at a time. Only one Bane per Warlock can be active on any one target. Oh my god, so many ones. 1-1-1-1-1. Basically, keep Bane of Doom up on the target. Then we're going to cast Haunt on cooldown. It is on an 8-second cooldown and will be refreshing your Corruption. After that, we're going to use our Shadow Flame. You can see here that it does a cone of damage. Targets in a cone in front of you, dealing shadow damage and an additional fire damage over 5.75 seconds. Only use this if it's viable for you to be in the melee range where this is actually going to do damage. If you have to, for the mechanics of the fight, be miles away, then so be it. Don't use it. Don't be running in just to make sure you can use it, because that'll be a DPS loss. But if you can be in melee, fantastic. Then we will be using it. Then, if we've got nothing else to do, it's going to be casting our Shadow Bolt, doing shadow damage. If you do see your Shadow Bolt proc as well, then do obviously use this as an instant cast one. So to recap, we're going to use the Curse of Elements and keep that up. Put Corruption on and keep it up by applying Haunt. Use Unstable Corruption and keep it up. Use Bane of Doom and keep it up. Again, refresh your Haunt and use it on cooldown. That'll also put Shadow Embrace on the target, where periodic shadow damage taken is increased by 5%, and hence why we want to use our Haunt absolutely on cooldown. Use your Shadow Flame on cooldown if you can get into melee, and then just fill out any spare time with Shadow Bolt. So you're basically just keeping up a load of dots and then filling with Shadow Bolt and also your Shadow Flame. And here is the Nightfall proc for your Shadow Bolt here. And basically that's that talent here, if you remember, giving your Corruption and Drain Life spells a 4% chance to cause you to enter a Shadow Trance, where you can then do an instant Shadow Bolt. Once our target then reaches 25% health, we change up this rotation a little bit. We're going to replace our Shadow Bolt with Drained Soul instead. And at that point as well, your Shadow Flame isn't really worth casting anymore. Apart from that, that's the only change we're really going to make in that period to the target, still keeping up our Corruption, Unstable Affliction, and Bane of Doom, using Haunt on cooldown, and of course our Shadow Bolt when it procs. And that really is it. But what about AoE or multiple targets? If we have 2 targets specifically, then we can put Bane of Doom and all of our dots on one target, and then on the other target, we can put Bane of Agony on them. Remember, you can only have Bane on one target at one time, meaning we can have Bane of Doom on one target, and then also Bane of Agony on a different target. To spread our Unstable Affliction and Corruption, we can then use Soul Swap on the target, which you can see here. I've just done Soul Swap on this target and then expelled it onto this target, and now we have the Jinx, the Bane of Agony, the Corruption, and the Unstable Affliction on here. Meanwhile, this one, well, would have had Bane of Doom on there. If there's 3 to 5 targets, we're going to do something completely different. We're actually going to cast Seed of Corruption on them and use our Soul Burn whenever possible. If, of course, you are in melee range of them, we can use our Shadow Flame because it's doing damage in a cone and therefore in kind of, AoE. If enemies are just going to live for like 10 seconds or less, you can simply just put Seed of Corruption on them as well and just leave all of the rest. It's just not going to be worth doing anything else. We also have some cooldowns we can use and some utilities. The 2 main cooldowns we're going to be using is summoning our Doom Guard on a 10-minute cooldown, and also our Demon Soul. Demon Soul, you and your summoned demon fuse souls, granting the Warlock a temporary power, depending on the demon currently enslaved, which is going to be the Fell Hunter. Periodic shadow damage is increased by 20% for 20 seconds. Obviously, most of our dots, as you've seen, are shadow damage. This is fantastic. Essentially, this is our main DPS cooldown. Of course, it's increasing massively the damage on our dots that we'll be doing, and therefore we should be using this with our potions, and also when Bloodlust or Heroism, etc., and any other trinkets that we're using are used to do massive burst damage. Apart from that, use this on cooldown. You can summon a Demon Guard or an Infernal. Generally, the Doom Guard is going to be the best one to use. It'll fight beside you for 45 seconds. As you can see here it is. And it is realistically only usable once per fight because, of course, it is on a 10-minute cooldown. One thing to note is that the Doom Guard is actually affected by your own spell power and also critical strike rating. So make sure that you're using any effects that are actually going to increase this before using your Doom Guard. Did I say Fell Hunter before that? If I did, I meant Doom Guard. I feel like I just said Fell Hunter, but I meant Doom Guard. And it isn't then affected by your haste. So your critical strike rating and spell power does affect the Doom Guard, but your haste doesn't. And I do mean the stats that you have before you press the button. Meaning, if you use a potion that increases your spell power after you've summoned the Doom Guard, that will not increase the damage of the Doom Guard. You must use the potion and then summon the Doom Guard. Otherwise, it won't increase it. We've also got a few abilities we've got in terms of utility, creating health stones, creating soul stones, where someone can resurrect immediately, like a battle res. We've also got Dark Intent as well. You link yourself to the targeted friendly target, increasing both of your haste by 3%. Generally, put this on someone that's going to really benefit from it and is one of your best DPS. When you or the linked target gains a critical periodic damage or healing effect, the other gains increased periodic damage and healing lasting for 7 seconds. You gain 3%, while the target gains 1%, and that can stack up to 3 times. The actual buff itself will last 30 minutes. So again, make sure you're putting this on someone who is one of the highest DPSs in your raid and will benefit greatly from the increased haste, etc. Lastly, Fell Armor is something we can put on ourselves, surrounding the caster of Fell Energy, increasing spell power, and causes you to be healed by 3% for any single target spell damage you do. There's a lot of different consumables, enchants and gems, etc. we can also use to enhance our gameplay. Starting off with the Head and Shoulder enchants above my head and shoulders here is the Arcanum of Hyjal and Greater Inscription of the Charged Lodestone from Pharazane in Deepholm. You are going to need to get revered and exalted with these factions to get these enchants, and there is a revered or blue version of the Pharazane one if you can't be bothered or just have not yet gotten to exalted. Regarding the gems that I would recommend on your gear, for the red slot I would say to get the Brilliant Inferno Ruby, adding 40 intellect, the Reckless Ember Topaz, adding intellect and haste, and the Purified Demon's Eye, adding intellect and hit rating, of course assuming that you still need the hit. For the meta gem, you can use the Burning Shadow Spirit Diamond, with 54 intellect and increased critical effect. Regarding the professions you should take, I always recommend for Warlocks to take Enchanting and Tailoring. Tailoring is going to be the best. Of course, you can make your own cloth gear, but also the light weave embroidery. It basically gives your spells a chance to increase your spell power by 295 for 15 seconds when casting a spell. And with Enchanting, you can put greater spell power on both of your rings, adding 46 spell power overall. No, you cannot take off Enchanting and keep the enchants. They will become inactive in case you are trying to think, oh, can I do that? No, you cannot. You should also be enchanting a weapon of Power Torrent, increasing your intellect by 500 for 12 seconds occasionally. On the actual consumables you can use, there's the Flask of the Draconic Mind, increasing your intellect, the Volcanic Potion, also increasing your intellect, which should be used with your other cooldowns, and, interestingly, a Flame Cap. Now, most of our damage is shadow, but we will be doing a little tiny bit of flame damage as well. Or fire damage even. Flame caps do not stack, at least they didn't last time in Cataclysm, so unless Blizzard have changed it, I'm massively assuming that you will still be able to use these. And it's kind of like a little unknown secret that I've got on my sleeve. Basically, this increases fire spell damage done and lasts 60 seconds. It doesn't stack with potions, it doesn't stack with anything else, meaning you can use it on its own completely. Obviously, it's not as useful for us as it is like a fire mage, etc., but we do have a few spells that do some fire damage, so whether this is actually going to be worth it or not for a warlock, it might not be, but I think it's worth mentioning just in case you want to use it. It's actually gained with herbalism in Outland of all places, which is crazy. Severed Sagefish Head, adding 90 intellect and stamina, is the food, and a mythical healing potion if you need it is the one we'll be using. And that lays out all of the foundations for how to play an Affliction Warlock. But there are a few other things I want to talk you through in regards to mastering the specialization and making sure that we are playing to the best of our ability. One really important thing is, of course, maintaining our dots. If you're not sure which are the most important, it is going to be the top 3 priorities I've got here: Corruption, Unstable Affliction, and Bane of Doom. It is really imperative that you have 100% uptime on these, or as absolutely close as possible. The same way your Doom Guard does, your dots will actually benefit from your statistics and stats at the point at which you cast them. Meaning it will take into account your haste and spell power, etc. before you press the button, or when you press the button, I should say. When the dot is up then, for example, let's say I put Corruption on the target and it's ticking away doing 2000 shadow damage. If I then used a potion now, the damage on that dot will not go up. It'll stay at 2100. You must use your potion and then refresh all of your dots to do the higher amount of damage. In theory, you do want to be using then your spells when things proc. However, upon testing it over the last few days when filming this video, it does actually appear that it is a DPS loss to, let's say, we put on Corruption and we've just put it on and now I use my Volcanic Potion. Using a global cooldown on refreshing Corruption now is going to be a DPS loss. You want really to be putting them on there when they're about to end anyway at the higher amount. Which, yes, can be obviously then a bit more complex. Ideally then, you're going to be refreshing the dots just before they expire. If you notice your dots expiring, that is going to be a good point to then take your potion, putting them all on there when you would have generally been doing it anyway. Of course, this is going to be the rotation that we're generally following, but on the opener of the rotation, there's a few slight tweaks I want you to actually do first before casting your other spells in this order. The first thing we're going to do is come in and cast a Shadow Bolt. This is going to put the Shadow Embrace dot, well not dot, but debuff on the target. Periodic shadow damage taken is increased by 5%. Then we're going to put Haunt on the target. Damage taken from shadow damage over a time effects increased by 23%. Then we can then go in to apply our Corruption, Unstable Affliction, and Bane of Doom. So although these 3 are actually the top priority to keep up, when we first go into battle, I want you to put a Shadow Bolt and then a Haunt on to make sure we're getting maximum damage out of these dots when we do apply them. Don't forget that when the target reaches 25% or under, Drained Soul is going to be doing double the amount of damage, and therefore we're swapping out Shadow Bolt as our filler spell for Drained Soul. You also need to remember about the Pandemic talent, which synergizes in with this, reduces the global cooldown of our spells, we don't care. Your Drained Soul has a 100% chance to refresh the duration of your Unstable Affliction when dealing damage on targets below 25% health. Remember, of course, that Haunt is going to be refreshing our Corruption. Well, our Unstable Affliction will also be refreshed, if I can get it to actually hit, so I don't have my hit cap. So Unstable Affliction will be refreshed by our Drained Soul, but only when the target's at 25% health or lower. Therefore, at 25% health or lower, our rotation's actually going to get a lot smaller. Corruption is, of course, going to be on the target, but we're not needing to refresh it because of Haunt. And Unstable Affliction will be on the target, but we don't need to refresh it. Therefore, you're only actually going to be using Bane of Doom, Haunt, and Drain Soul unless you get an instant Shadow Bolt when the target is at low health. And that's pretty much it at that point, because everything else is being refreshed for you. If you're wondering about your soul shards and how to actually get these when you are going into combat, remember I said that for our soul burn, we need soul shards and that you can only use 3 in a fight? We can use our soul harvest spell if we're not in combat, which I am with this bloody dummy. So you seek out nearby wandering souls, regenerating 45% health from free soul shards. Cannot be used in combat. And you can basically use this to get your maximum soul shards before you go into combat, meaning then you've got your free uses of soul burn ready to go. Remember our Dark Intent spell? I want to talk about that as well, and who best to put it on. If your raid is really struggling with healing and you're wiping a lot, you could even put this on a healer. And in priority list order, the best healers to put it on would be first a Restoration Druid, then a Holy Priest, then a Restoration Shaman, then a Discipline Priest, and lastly, a Holy Paladin. Interesting, as Holy Paladins are the best healers, but they're not going to benefit best from your Dark Intent. If this isn't the case and you are putting this on a DPS, the best would be a Shadow Priest, then a Fire Mage, then a Balanced Druid, then an Elemental Shaman, and lastly, a Frost Mage, in that priority order. So if there is a Shadow Priest in the group, it's often going to be that Dark Intent should go on that player. And that is pretty much it, guys, for all of the advanced mechanics I want to talk to you about. That is how you're going to play Affliction Warlock in Cataclysm Classic. Hopefully this was useful for you. If you do have any other questions, feel free to join my Discord where we can help you out any way you may need. And if you would like to support the channel, get behind the scenes guides and info, along with LVI profiles, written guides, and WoW spreadsheets, please do consider joining my Patreon. A lot of people in the gaming industry, people that watch gaming use ad blockers these days, and especially in gaming, as a small channel like myself, we're not really earning a lot of money on YouTube, and Patreon is the main way that you can support the channel if you would like to, ensuring that I can keep getting out these videos that you see today if you enjoy them, as I only do this in my spare time. If not, of course, don't worry. I just want to let you know that it is there should that be something you wish to do. And you can, of course, support by just watching these videos, subscribing, liking, and letting me know your thoughts down below in the comments. If you are looking for other guides, whether that be for Warlocks or other classes, you can click this playlist here where I've done every single one for you.